Hey folks, my name is Waylon Lewis of Elephant Journal, and I want to talk about the Buddhist slogan like a saying, an aphorism, a quote, victory over aggression. This is a phrase that came from Chogyam Trungpa, my parents' Buddhist teacher, and he's referring to a kind of profound notion, which is that we're always going to war. We're always creating further aggression whenever we're confronting aggression. So a lot of his students were activists. And those of you who are activists, I consider myself an activist sometimes, depends on the month. I'm an activist in my own way. I care about empathy. I care about, say, veganism. I care about politics. I care about equal rights. But I'm not as active as many, and respect to you. Those of us who engage in activism often fall into aggression and burnout ourselves. And so this phrase from Chogyam Trungpa, the Buddhist, saying victory over aggression is really a powerful one. From the point of view that our enemy is nobody. Our enemy is not George W. Bush. Our enemy is not even Donald Trump. Our enemy is not Barack Obama. Our enemy is not Bill Clinton. Our enemy is no one out there particularly. Our enemy is our own aggression, our own self-righteousness, our own heaviness. And that's not some profound 420 thing like, bro, totally, dude. It's more than that and less than that. It's the notion that we, as they say in Buddhism, our enemies are our greatest teachers. Our enemies bring out our own aggression, our own frustration, our own insecurity, our own fear. And as Pema Chodron says, things won't go away until they teach us what they have to teach us. She says it more eloquently than that, but the notion is that we actually have to open up and listen and learn. I think men particularly, we sometimes struggle with that. We want to go out with self-righteousness instead of listening, instead of an open mind. And hopefully this generation, we're now all learning that together, that openness is helpful and listening is helpful. When we say enemies, we don't mean to solidify it. Is the notion of we want to almost embrace our enemies. As Abraham Lincoln, one of our greatest presidents in the US, said, I defeat my enemy when I make him or her my friend. That's the ultimate victory, right? Victory over aggression. So our victory is never, our war is never against one person or one country or one coworker or one spouse or partner or a child or dog or whatever our challenges in our life. Our enemy, and often it's, our most loved ones, our dearest ones, who create the most challenge for us, right? So we wouldn't call them enemies particularly. We would say, what I'm trying to attain victory over is aggression itself. So it's sort of the corollary, to put in another name, to FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President Roosevelt's famous intonation, we have nothing to fear, but fear itself. We have nothing to defeat except war itself. We have nothing to defeat except aggression itself. So often, and I'm vegan, you'll see that with anyone. You'll see that with religious people, with vegan people, people who supposedly are dedicated to peace, supposedly dedicated to love. We get caught up in aggression, defending what we love. And isn't that the cause of every war, right? We're trying to protect what we care about and keep away the bad, the baddie. But, there is no real enemy. There are people who create war, who create aggression, who create unimaginable atrocities. From a vegan point of view, those of us who are part of the supply demand for factory farming are part of that every day. There are abusers out there. But often abusers, as we know, were abused themselves as a child. So how do we end this cycle of aggression, of saying out there, you're bad, of scapegoating other? Restorative justice is a really powerful thing to look at. We've done some articles on that on Elephant Journal. Meditation, dealing with our own confusion and aggression. And I think fundamentally for ourselves, for myself, I know, I get taught stuff every day. I learn stuff every day, hopefully. I'm wrong every day, for sure. I know that it's important to listen. So I often talk about that image of the Vajra in Buddhism. I wish I had one here, but the Vajra is that notion of invincibility. True invincibility is cutting through any neurosis that comes in. When someone gives you aggression, you maybe block that or you cut through that. Not cut in an aggressive way. You just kind of like a cheese grater. You're just like, you're there and you're like, you don't need to buy into that stuff. You can have healthy boundaries. And then if there's a kernel of wisdom, if there's a kernel of helpfulness, we all have friends say, hey, you do that thing that's super irritating. I hate that. Why don't you, some of that could feel hurtful, but some of that could be super helpful. So it's sort of discerning between what's helpful and true and what's maybe unhelpful and maybe a little bit loaded or neurotic. And even if it's neurotic, there's usually something helpful in it. You can hear the dog over here is not listening to my little Buddhist talk here. It is engaging in full-on fear and aggression. What do you think, Redford? Redford's over here looking. So anyway, I want to talk about that because recently on @WaylonLewis on Instagram, I posted a thing about veganism. Redford? Good boy. So I posted a thing saying, if you consider yourself a feminist, and hopefully almost all of us consider ourselves feminists, right? How do you rationalize that, or how do you match that up ethically with dairy, right? With the forced impregnation, you could say rape, I would, of cows their entire life, their nipples are rubbed raw and all this awful stuff. I could go into it more, but you haven't asked, so I won't. And, taking away their children to the veal industry. And the responses were actually really beautiful and really inspiring from people overall. And then I put up a thing right after that saying, if you consider yourself a vegan, how do you rationalize, how do we rationalize eating monoculture crops like soy, corn, palm oil is 99.9% bad stuff. And that is destroying forests, right? That's destroying animal habitat. That's how do you rationalize flying or driving without offsetting it? I'm a huge fan of offsets. They get a bad rap. I think offsets are amazing. No one's going to stop flying tomorrow. We could fly less. We could take the train more. We could bike more. We could carpool more. We can do a better job. This feels like a segue, but I basically I tried to call we vegans out on being all perfect and hoity-toity and high and mighty, and at the same time call out those of us who consider ourselves feminists but are engaging in this sort of rape culture around cows and taking their children away. And cows have deep friendships and deep feelings for their children. This is all scientifically established. So, can we call ourselves out? And there were a lot of beautiful comments. One person said, it feels a little bit like you're shaming people. And I said, oh, that's unfortunate. That's definitely not my intention. My intention was to kind of call myself and other vegans out to account, and also to ask people how they rationalize that. Like literally, I wanted to know. I wasn't necessarily trying to attack. I don't think that's super helpful. So I felt like that word shaming is a heavy word. Shame is a heavy word. And I just said, for myself, when someone points out something I'm doing wrong, I really try to listen to it like the Vajra. I really try to discern what's helpful, what's not, what's true, what's not, and try to learn from that, hopefully. Like I remember being told about overfishing and all that back when I ate fish, and I was like, oh, bummer, now I'm not going to eat all this stuff. And it really kind of bummed me out because I loved sushi at the time and still would. And anyway, I feel like I'm drifting, but it's important for ourselves to try to examine ourselves, and we all are full of self-deception. We all have done awful things. We all are doing awful things probably every day, and if we can just be responsible for it to the extent we can, that's kind of instead of just saying there are evil people out there and trying to destroy them, trying to create some sort of healing so that we don't perpetuate this stuff for generation and generation, and that we are stop being mean to animals and stop being mean to one another and stop creating unnecessary wars that we make young women and men fight for us. So anyway, hope you're all well. Hope you all watched the Democratic debates in the US. They're tomorrow. And if you have any comments or questions, I'm all about it. I don't see anything. I see lots of comments on Facebook. Beautiful things, inspiration. Our goal should be to try and do better every day. Amen. Well said. It's that simple and it's that hard. So anyway, thank you to those of you who listened, and big love to everybody. And may we, examine ourselves without being too hard on ourselves. We don't have to shame ourselves. We don't have to shame other people. We don't have to attack other people when we see them attacking us. Maybe we can just have a private conversation with someone you're having difficulty with and really try to come to terms, and have a private conversation with yourself and try to come to terms, instead of creating further warfare. I think there's enough war on this planet, and we're all effed up people who are fundamentally good. And how can we heal up this world and stop creating so much aggression? All right. Thank you, everyone. Big respect.